Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and we are here at Linode headquarters in Philadelphia. And today we have with us once again Mike Maney, a strategist at Akamai Linode. First of all, Mike, it's great to see you in person after a long time.
Great seeing you here in Philly too. Great to be back.
Yeah, you are in your home turf, right? That's what they say, house turf, home turf.
This is our house, yes.
Exactly, which also means that this is where you are the strongest, and when the conversation is going to be more about hyperscalers without naming anybody. Uh, the conversation that I have had with a lot of, of course, ecosystem players, sometimes they happen to be partners, sometimes competitors of hyperscalers. They have started to feel a lot of pain points, the pressure is there, complexity of cloud is there, cost of cloud, and cloud cost is not just because of the potential economic downturn, but companies are trying to becoming more and more cost efficient, cost effective. So if we look at just hyperscalers, and of course the big, AWS is the big dominant player there. Talk a bit about, how have you seen the landscape has changed where the same partners who used to use AWS now perceive them as a competitor. Data gravity is there. So talk about how you have seen the change of not characteristic essentially, but still,
I go back to something that Matt Acey, who a lot of us know, once said is, it's a big pie, right? Technology is a big pie. Cloud is a big pie with a lot of slices for a lot of people. And, they're the big three, Amazon, Azure, GCP, and there were also alternative players, formerly Linode, DO, Vultr, and OVH, and a couple of others. And there's some at the lower end of that spectrum as well. What's happened is over the evolution of cloud, a lot of what companies need can be satisfied now by a wider range of cloud provider, whether that, not only the hyperscalers, but also some of these alternative clouds. Now, Akamai acquired Linode back in March, which moves Linode up that scale a little bit from out of that alternative cloud category. But it's exciting because there's choice in the market. And if you're a customer, if you're a developer, you're going to go to you can now find the best fit for what you need, whether it's a storage bucket or whether it is a developer environment or something local, something more local, or something with better cost and better price performance. That choice is there, and that is unbelievably exciting for us in tech and for developers.
I want to just hear from you, how have you seen the evolution of AWS?
I mean, they're AWS, right? So it's still that nobody's taking down AWS anytime soon. Everybody's seen the market share numbers there, but they still run into that challenge of trust in a lot of cases, and we've seen it in data out of both ClearPath Strategies and folks like TechStrong, where developers and DevOps professionals across the board have a concern about being competed with or being knocked out of a market, not just a product, but their entire industry. And that is something that no developer or company should ever have to be concerned about, right? That should be, if you survey somebody on that should be across the board 100%. Nope, not worried about it at all. My partner is trustworthy. They're not going to knock me out of the market. That's why we see, I think, a lot of increased focus on pure play providers, people that don't have retail operations, people that aren't in pharma or anything else. But again, large market, lots of choice for people. So developers can choose. Do I want to go with? Do I want to contribute to maybe putting myself out of business, or do I want to align myself with a pure play that can, that's not going to knock me out of business?
Can you talk about some big AWS customers who felt so threatened that they are kind of looking at building kind of their own cloud? Is that also happening?
Well, I don't know, any direct ones that have moved off of there, but great example. Aaron Tilley wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal. about Walmart building out its own cloud. I mean, that's the exact, flips all of this on its head. It's not a cloud company that's worried about, or a developer or a technology company that's worried. It's a retail company that's worried that its cloud company is going to compete against it. And that's scary, right? And it'll be fun to watch what Walmart does with this. They have a pretty strong track record of doing technology that a lot of us don't even realize has been developed there out of their team. It's a pretty strong team.
You have to have developer resources who understand those technologies. The technologies are changing so fast. So talk about what are you seeing from the perspective of complexity and cost as well.
First, I worked at IBM for a number of years, and one of my executives who created IBM.com actually had a Netfinity server in his basement serving up music. So that is not foreign to me. But it is the cloud has gotten, and providers have, created complexity. And for 80% of the business, and I'm making that number up just a little bit, but it's still high. For 80% of the companies out there, they don't need all of that complexity. They're looking for something simpler, right? They're looking for something that just gets the job done. We often forget about that in technology, right? We think that we've created all of this stuff, everybody's going to use it, and we all know how it works. The reality is, most of the people out there and most of the companies and our customers, like, just give me a tool that works for me, that is going to be easy, that is going to be easy to manage, easy to deploy, that's going to be secure, right? That is not going to break my bank and surprise me with any costs at the end of the day, right? That it becomes a very important thing. So people are looking for things that are simpler and a little bit more predictable.
When I look at Linode, you talked about pure play. We talk about Web3 these days, and Web3 is kind of brings back the whole experience of Internet 1.0, right? Where you have more control over your cloud. So when I look at Linode, it's like you go back to the same. You don't have to worry about data gravity. Linode or other alternative cloud providers, they're not going to suck up your data and then use it against you because they are not competing with you. So can you also talk about the role alternative cloud providers? I was actually talking to one of your friends, OVH, and they were like, yeah, maybe we should call ourselves primary cloud providers, and AWS will become the secondary. Okay, you can put some services there. So talk about the role that you see providers like Linode, DigitalOcean, OVH can play in this space. As you say, the pie is bigger, but there is a lot of misconception that everybody think, hey, you have to go to hypercloud for almost everything, which is not the reality.
Well, you don't have to, right? And that's the thing, is you want to be able to put your applications, you want to be able to put your data where it makes sense for you and where it is best for your business or your organization. I want to go back because you mentioned you used a word that I think is really important to a lot of people right now, and across, not even in cloud, but across technology, and that is control. People want to take control back, right? They've abdicated control to larger companies, to AWS's, to Facebook's, to others, and they want to get that control back. That is where the pure play providers, people like Akamai and Linode and some of these other alternative cloud providers, that's where that starts to come in and be a competitive differentiator, right? These pure plays like us give that control back to developers. They give it back to companies, and it's where we're moving to, and it's the root of the internet itself, right? It was giving that control back, right? It was being able to develop on standards, right? Not being locked into these walled gardens. And we've seen this throughout industry, throughout history, where dominant companies, right, let's call it dominant companies, suddenly aren't dominant anymore, right? I'm sure you could name a couple right now, right? Car companies, internet companies, technology companies, right? We know them by brand names that were once, you never got fired for buying this company. We're at that point in cloud. It's matured, right? And as it matures, companies start to get pressure, right? They get bloated, and companies start to get pressure from upstarts. And that's what we're starting to see in the cloud right now. And people that were once king are not always king.
You were talking about it's a bigger pie. When I look at a bigger pie, that pie looks like to me as multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. The fact is, and I love the way you said, the fact is there are companies, no matter which year we are in, there are different industries, they will have different needs. Some will run private cloud on OpenStack in their own on-prem. Some will need public cloud provider, and many more will need alternative cloud providers like Linode. So can you also talk about the evolution that you're seeing of multi-cloud? Because sometimes we get so sucked up in this whole concept of we need all those resources, we don't. So talk about how multi-cloud is also creating market for everywhere.
In the industry, we argue that there's always the debate on multi-cloud, real or myth, right? And the reality is multi-cloud is one, right? Multi-cloud is it's not even as one. It's multi-cloud is a reality, and whether we're talking about multi-cloud at the infrastructure level, where people are using Linode in one case and AWS in another together, or in cases where we're counting Office 365 as cloud. On the desktop, not as infrastructure, but people are still using it because they still have to manage it because they're all accessing it through the cloud. So there are definitional challenges there on that. But it's true. Like you see a lot of cases where you mentioned AWS. Almost everybody's using AWS, right? But in a lot of cases, what you don't realize is that they're also using Linode in a lot of cases. Maybe it's a division, or maybe they're using us for our object storage because it's got better price performance, and it's compatible with S3. What they're doing is, and where multi-cloud really plays in, is what's the best, which provider gives you the best fit for the thing that you need to do, and that's sort of where it comes in, and why multi-cloud is, it's not a debate, it's real.
When I look at multi-cloud, I always look at transportation. You need airlines, you need cars, you need trucks. So multi-cloud is same, different use cases, different needs.
And it's not just hypercloud, right? It's hypercloud and alternative cloud. It's public, it's private. It's that big pie again, where our job is not to force technologies down on customers. It's to help them become more efficient, more powerful, to help them scale, and to fix the challenges that they are having, to help them solve really hard challenges in a modern world.
I have talked to a lot of Linode customers. You folks have craft of code, and one of the pain points that businesses face is that there are a lot of times people are just enthusiastic about technology, so they just want to set up a website and get started. Then there are mom and pop. I have a lot of friends. They just run a business of selling garments. They have to set up the website. And then there are big players, even DoD customers. They want to run some big data centers. They want some machine learning. And it's not one size fits all solution, And also, sometimes it's become so overwhelming when you look at just the dashboard of all those hyperscalers, big cloud provider. You have to be a mathematician just to calculate the cost. So once again, when I look at alternative cloud provider, you are serving from individuals who are just getting started all the way to big. So there still has to be a market who is serving this whole bandwidth of users. Not everybody is running massive scale companies.
No, I mean, so you bring up a really good point, right? Is you have people that just need a website, developers that want to play and test and pioneer some new technologies, but they don't want to be tied into long-term contracts or into something that they forgot to shut off. is another good example, right? You have others that are maybe small businesses or smaller enterprises that don't need to do quantum computing and have no plans to do that. But they need something more than just a simple web host, right? A WordPress provider. They move to the cloud, right? Maybe it's just a simpler cloud. So they're not going to have the budget of a massive global enterprise. So they need something that's in between. And then you've got companies that are large with global, high demand, high volume challenges that need something that maybe only an Amazon can provide. That's fine, right? That's great. Like that's a healthy, vibrant ecosystem. And what gets interesting is you start to look at, okay, we know some people can only serve that, some companies can only serve, providers can only serve this end. Some are just really comfortable in that middle end. And then others are set up to just do that big enterprise. And it's really hard for them to move down level on that. We call this thing the continuum of compute, or computing, right? I guess is probably the more correct term, the continuum of cloud computing. And it's how do you serve customers that are going to need to go from cloud now out to edge? How do you do that? That's one of the biggest things that has been a benefit and the promise of Akamai plus Linode, right? When Akamai acquired Linode, is now all of a sudden you've got a strong cloud provider that is now tied in with somebody with unbelievable scale and security and delivery, and that gets really powerful.
What do you think is going to be the next phase? As one point, you're also talking about the yesterday's kings were not kings today, and which also tells us that today's king will not remain kings tomorrow. I don't want to name any company, but we have seen it throughout the history.
Doesn't matter. Right? You've seen it, right?
Yeah,
Tech is cyclical.
Yeah. So talk a bit about what do you perceive, or what do you see, envision as the next phase in this, cloud computing world? Where are we heading?
Something John Patrick told me years ago, when at the early start of the web. He goes, people need to remember we're only 2% into this. And it's similar to where we feel like we're at with cloud right now, is we're really only at the start. Those of us in it have been, wow, we've been doing this for 18 years, 18 years. We're just starting, right? People are just starting to get comfortable with it and to understand it. Now we're moving on out to the edge, right? So I don't want to say we've solved for cloud, but cloud is effectively one. It's the way we do business now. So what's next, right? The famous line from Jed Bartlett on The West Wing. What's next? Well, what's next is how do you serve the entire continuum of computing from cloud all the way out to edge? And there are going to be very few players that actually have the breadth of scale, security, and delivery that can do that, right? That have that gravitas to be able to do that. And that means there are going to be some larger winners, new entrants into that hyperscale race like Akamai and Linode. And then there are going to be some that are going to get relegated back into that alternative cloud or even lower category, only because they're not going to be able to scale at that level.
One more thing you earlier talked about, and I want to just talk about when you look at the next phase, is also data. Because more and more companies, we live in a data-centric world. Yes. Just look at the Tesla cars, their actual resources, the data that they're collecting on users, how they're driving, that is the whole secret sauce they have.
Well, I just said to somebody the other day, to Joe McKendrick, stop measuring cars in miles per hour. It's really terabytes per hour.
Right. Which also means that a lot of these companies will be very, very, kind of skeptical of relying on a hyperscaler that might compete with them. Once again, let's go to AWS. AWS has their own ambitions of self-driving car. They are, running, the betas in San Francisco. So and as we are becoming more and more data-centric, every company will be leveraging some data. So do you also see that because companies will become more and more data-driven and data-centric, they will also become more careful whether they want to go with a player that competes with them, or they want to go with a player which, in your words, either pure play or is not competing in it? Because we have to look at the future, which is data-driven.
It's our job to look at the future, but they absolutely will, and that's why having that choice is going to be so important, right? Those options to work with people that aren't going to necessarily compete with you, whether today or with designs to in the future. Doesn't mean that you're not going to still work with those companies, right? It's not like somebody's going to not work with AWS for certain things, but they're going to hedge their bets. They're going to keep that control by putting certain workloads and certain applications on a different provider, right? So they're going to do what Right. It's multi-cloud again, right? They're going to do what's right for their business. That will require them to, we get out of that technology, move beyond just thinking about where do I put my S3 buckets, but get up into a higher strategic level of debate internally on, okay, let's start making decisions, across the business. Where are we going? How is that going to affect our cloud strategy? So your CIOs and your CTOs and your chief strategy officers, even your CFOs, are going to start to have those even more harder conversations and more visionary conversations to make.
And I feel that, when I look at Akamai and Linode's acquisition, I feel that it happened at the right time, because the market, that the way it is heading, the way it's evolving, as you rightly said, there will be some workloads that will still run. I mean, we are going to live in a multi-cloud world. Some workload will run on public cloud, but all the data sensitive stuff might move to a lot of alternative cloud providers, or where they don't feel, because sometimes on-prem can be expensive too.
Right.
So when you can get on-prem like experience with Linode, why won't you get it?
It is an amazing time to be in cloud right now. Plain and simple. It is an amazing time to be in cloud right now. There's so much going on. There are so many opportunities and options for companies to be able to do what's right for their business, and for developers and people that are looking to work in cloud. It's never been a better time anyway, right? We have a huge skills gap right now, so there's huge opportunity for students and for people in other careers to start to adapt and move over to cloud.
Mike, once again, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talk about this. This is a really important topic in today's world, because we don't talk about the complexity. We have started to talk about it, but we don't talk much about what are the solutions, what are the alternatives. People sometimes say, hey, you know what? This is the essential, necessary evil. We have to just suck it up, but that's not the case. So there are a lot of solutions out there. So thanks for sharing those insights. And as usual, I would love to have you back on the show.
It is always great to talk with you, Swap.